Alright students, welcome to today's lesson. We are going to be taking a look at the Holocaust. Obviously I'm off camera because we are going to be reading through an article and then talking a little bit about the Holocaust, and then you have an assignment at the end of this. Now for those who don't know, most middle school students know by now, but the Holocaust was the murder of 6 million Jews. Now, by the way, there were more than just Jewish people that were killed in concentration camps, but we focus on the Jewish people because those concentration camps were mainly for them, to wipe them off the face of the earth, to kill all Jews in Europe. And when an ethnic group is targeted to be wiped off the face of the earth, we call that genocide. When you murder a group of people with the goal of making them no longer exist, and it's because of their ethnicity, we call it genocide. This is one of the most horrific things that has ever happened in human history. And one of the phrases that comes from the Holocaust, that comes from people who survived the Holocaust, that actually you can find in the country of Israel today, is never again. Never again. In the case of Israel, they say never again because they mean never again will we let anyone do that to us. People who are non-Jewish, when they say never again, they mean never again should we allow someone to rise to power who's willing to do this. Or never again should we sit by as someone has, in this case, anti-Semitic views and is persecuting whatever ethnic group. But if you're going to say a phrase like never again, then you actually need to know what happened. So we're going to read through this article. It's a short article, but it gives us an idea of what the Holocaust is. Now, I've linked this article on Canvas. You are free to go. You might want to pull it up and then have it alongside as I'm reading it, or if you've got a good camera and you can actually just read along you could actually just follow along as I read it. So I'm going to read it out loud. You are free to follow along or pull up the article yourself and read it to yourself. But we're going to go through it. We're going to take a look at some of the pictures at the end of the article, and we'll go from there with what your assignment is. All right? Here we go. So the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism was a centuries-long phenomenon in Europe, but it reached its height in Germany during the Nazi era, 1933 to 1945. The Nazis also claimed that Romani, those are gypsies, that's another ethnic group, Slavs, meaning Poles and Russians, physically and mentally disabled people were Untermenschen, subhuman. In other words, let's stop for a second. When it says subhuman, what you're saying is that those people aren't really human beings. Yeah, they're kind of like human beings, but they're not really human beings. And did not deserve to live. So a couple things before we go on to the next paragraph. If you're going to destroy a group of people, if you're going to murder a group of people, you first have to get a population to see them as not really human beings. Because if someone's not really a human being, then there's all sorts of horrible things you can do to them. If you realize that they're the same as you are, then you're less likely to harm them. But once you dehumanize someone, remember we talked with communism, we talked about, once people are just part of a group and you no longer have to judge them as individuals, what kind of damage you can do? Well, the same thing. Once you look, like in this case, at physically and mentally disabled people and you say, they're not really human beings, then there's all sorts of horrible things that you can do to them. That's why I think we mentioned in an earlier video, Jews were compared to rats, to get people to see Jews as just nothing more than just some horrible animal that needs to be exterminated. So this is what was going on in Germany. This was their view of certain groups of people. Right, let's keep reading with the second paragraph. On assuming power as absolute ruler of the German state, Hitler began a systematic campaign to strip Jews of their property and their jobs in academia, that would be universities, the judiciary, courts, the military, and the civil service. Synagogues were defiled and burned. Jewish businesses were boycotted or shut down. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 denied Jews their German citizenship. forbade Jews to marry non-Jews, and took away most of their political rights. So stop right there. So if you were a Jew living in Germany in 1935, there were shops that you couldn't go into because you were Jewish. You couldn't marry non-Jewish people. There were jobs that you weren't allowed to have because you were Jewish. There were places in the city you weren't allowed to go because you were Jewish. So these laws, and they took away their German citizenship, even though they had been in Germany, in some cases, all of their lives. They had been born in Germany, had been born German citizens. This is what was happening in Germany in the lead up to the Holocaust. All right, let's continue to read. Jews became scapegoats for everything awful that had happened to Germany over the previous several decades. Inflation, economic depression, the loss of World War I, and the punitive Treaty of Versailles. No salvation is possible, Hitler had told his followers in 1922, until the bearer of disunion, the Jew, has been rendered powerless to harm. Stop right there. In other words, what Hitler is saying is, there's no way to save Germany until, basically, the Jews are the problem, and there's no way to save Germany until we've destroyed the Jews. That would be the translation. It says, until the Jews have been rendered powerless to harm. In other words, he's saying they're harming us, we've got to basically strip them of their power. Now, if you remember, I think it was a couple of videos ago, I think it was when we did part 1 of World War I said, once you blame any group of people for all of your problems, and everything that's bad that's happened in your life is always someone else's fault, you're in a lot of trouble. Not only is it dumb, but you're in a lot of trouble because then you view those people as enemies. And that was what Hitler wanted to do with the Jewish population. So let's keep reading. During a Nazi-provoked riot known as Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, on November 9th, 1938, at least 267 synagogues were destroyed. At least 91 people were murdered. Countless Jewish businesses and homes were vandalized and destroyed, and 30,000 Jews were sent to Dachau, Buchenwald, Sachsenhausen, and other concentration camps. When Hitler began his march of conquest in 1939, Jews in countries under the fascist heel, beginning with heavily Jewish Poland, were herded into unsanitary ghettos, walled-off sections of the city where they were denied proper food, medical services, and heat. Starvation and disease killed hundreds of thousands of Jews in Warsaw and Lodz, two of the largest ghettos in Poland. Many Jews escaped the ghetto and went into hiding, often relying on the kindness and bravery of non-Jewish friends. To hide a Jew was to put one's life and the lives of one's family at risk. If caught, those hiding Jews were imprisoned or shot. Few Jews were able to survive the war in hiding. Like German-born Anne Frank and her family, who spent much of the war hiding in Amsterdam, they were usually found and shipped off to concentration camps. In 1942, high-ranking Nazi party officials met secretly in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee, to formulate plans for the final solution to the Jewish question. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were already in Nazi concentration camps serving as slave laborers for the German war effort. After the Wannsee Conference, the Nazis began large-scale deportations from the ghettos. Victims were herded together at train stations, loaded onto cattle cars, and taken, unknown to them, to extermination camps, killing centers in Poland with specially designed gassing facilities. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Chelmno, and other SS-run camps employed industrial-style killing, using a pesticide designed to kill rats. The old, the very young, and the physically weak, those unable to work, were killed first. When the strong grew weak and unable to work, they were exterminated. But by mid-1943, almost all Jews who arrived at a death camp were put to death immediately. Charlotte Weiss recalled that when she arrived at Auschwitz in 1944 with her sisters, they saw mountains of eyeglasses, shoes, and clothing belonging to the victims. We were shaking, she said. We knew the end was not going to be good. There were valorous efforts to resist the Holocaust. A number of armed uprisings in the ghettos and camps surprised the Nazis, but all were put down with fanatical brutality. Some Jews escaped ghettos and joined partisan movements fighting against the Nazis from forest enclaves. Within the ghettos and the killing camps, acts of defiance, small or large, were suppressed and the brave dissidents savagely punished. Let's see if we can get that up there where you guys can actually see it. There we go. When the Allies began to close in on Germany in late 1944 and early 1945, the Nazis forced the surviving prisoners on long marches to camps, believed to be out of the way of the advancing enemy armies. Hundreds of thousands died of exposure, violence, and starvation on these death marches. As the Allied armies moved into Germany and Poland, they liberated the concentration and extermination camps, and witnesses to these scenes, war reporters and military personnel, were horrified by what they found. The world already knew the Germans were gassing or working to death Jews and other ethnic victims in these camps. Escaped prisoners had reported conditions to the media and to the government officials in the United Kingdom and the United States, but it wasn't until camps were liberated that the full horror of Nazi crimes were exposed to the world. So this is the Holocaust. When we talk about what is the Holocaust, this is the removal and the extermination of Jewish people simply because they're Jewish. Now, one of the things that we have a lot of evidence, and one of the things we use is photographs. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, hey, why show people? Why show these things? Because if you don't show what's going on visually, a lot of times people forget. And just becomes a fact of history, but they don't realize that these were real people. So if you look here, you can see my finger there. This kid, that's a picture of him at about 3 years old. He didn't make it past his 9th birthday. He was sent to a concentration camp and died at the age of 9. Over here, when we talk about families, those were families, they're being herded. They're eventually heading to train cars, and from there, they're going to be sent to extermination camps. Now, if you notice, like this kid here, those are the kind of kids who are normally going to be killed first. They're gone the minute they get to those extermination camps. A lot of times, women, if it's an extermination camp, they're killed immediately. See this man here who looks like he's probably about 50 years old? He probably won't make it either if he's going to an extermination camp because he's too old to work. And you think about it, I know that sounds cold when I just say, well, this is what happened, but that is what happened. Because the Nazis and these soldiers, people like that, had grown up with this idea of the Jews aren't really human. So you're not really murdering anybody. They're horrible people. And yet you and I know better. So, see those boys there? All right, so you notice the star that's on their shirts to mark them as Jews. All right, so those two boys, they didn't survive the Holocaust either. They were sent with their families to concentration camps. They were killed at that time. See his family right here? All right, there we go. That family, this is in the 1920s. This is before the Hitler taking over in the Holocaust. Only 2 of those people survived that are in that family picture. Only 2 made it out of the Holocaust alive. And so, Holocaust, what was it like? This is a very classic picture of a German officer executing a man right here. And you can see the bodies. This is what we call a mass grave. So this mass grave, there's already dead bodies. This guy's being shot in the head, and he's going to be in there, and then they just throw dirt on all of them. When the United States, when the Soviet Union, when soldiers were going to liberate the camps, the German officers would dig up these bodies to burn them to try to hide the evidence. But we have the pictures. You can see with this photo over here. See this guy? He's alive. This guy is alive, but you see this train car? All these people are dead. These are all dead bodies. And this would have been a train car heading to an extermination camp. A lot of people didn't survive the trip. All right. This picture here, you see all this white? These are all dead bodies of women. All right. These 2, this black here and this black shirt right there, these are Nazi women finishing off those that didn't die with the initial shots. So it's kind of grainy, but you can see this. And again, Why am I showing you this? Because you have to understand, this isn't just a number. These were all real people, and this is something very horrible that happened. This is a very classic photo of dead bodies. These are laborers, just worked and starved to death, and a lady seeing these bodies and seeing the horrible things that happened. You had soldiers, soldiers that had made it through some of those brutal battles who could not stomach seeing what had happened to these people at these death camps. All right, so see this here? What do you see? You notice you can see their rib cages, you can see the collarbone. This camp has been liberated, but look at these guys. The soldiers would report that the people that were still alive were like walking skeletons. And you can see just lack of food, lack of water. And this is from a camp that's been rescued. The Nazis, again, because they didn't see people as human beings, what they would do is they would remove anything from them before killing them, or sending people to the gas chamber. They would remove any item that they thought was valuable or could make money. So false teeth with silver and gold false teeth, they removed all of those. So if you go to Auschwitz, there's a room that's just piled. There's a glass case that's just piled with all these false teeth that were taken from prisoners before execution. You know what these are? Piles of eyeglasses. And again, surprised it took me that long to hit the stand. So, eyeglasses. Why would someone keep eyeglasses? As proof that these people really did exist. And you can see each eyeglass, and think about it, each pair of glasses belonged to a person. And look at these piles. If you go to Auschwitz, which is one of the most famous extermination camps, if you can't tell what this is hair. All sorts of hair in a glass case. So they would shave the hair, especially from the women. They would shave the women, and that way they could use the hair for weaving carpets and things like that. So this room is just full of nothing but hair, and look how large this room is. This was the pesticide that was used, Zyklon B. So they'd make it into a gas, and so they would tell the prisoners, oh, hey, yeah, you're going to take a shower. And they go into this large room, and then they lock them in the room and just gas them, and then they would die. Now, again, why is it important to learn about this? There are many horrible things. I'm going to pick up this camera for a second so you can see me. So, there are many horrible things that have happened in history. Why is this important to learn about? Because it tells us that human beings are capable of some unbelievable evil. It's also for us to realize what that phrase means when it says never again. So never again, the goal is that something like this never happens. So the more we learn about it, the more we know about it, the more we can tell if something like that is going to happen again, or if a dictator rises to power who's willing to do something like that. So the question for you in your assignment is this: how can countries stop the Holocaust from ever happening again? So not individual people, but how can countries? So I'm thinking about the government. You tell me. I want you to come up with a plan. Please make sure that your letters are capitalized. Make sure that you're writing it with complete sentences. But what could a country do? And it might be a law. You might think, oh, there's a law that can be passed, or maybe there's some education that can go on. You can come up with it. So it doesn't just have to be a law. But what could a country do to keep something like this from happening again? That's your assignment. And yeah, it's a little bit hard, but I want you to be able to think about it and then come up with your answer, submit it to me. Okay? Take care, guys.